To our witnesses, thank you. Ambassador, I'd like to start with you, if I might. It's a point that's been a concern of mine for some time regarding international organizations, and that's the fact that American funding of these organizations is far disproportionate to the American employees that are present at those organizations. We're far underrepresented, in my perspective, and if I look at how other countries accomplish disproportionate overrepresentation, they take advantage of a series of programs. The UN Junior Professional Officer Program, the World Bank Donor-Funded Staffing Program, and the UN Special Assistant to the Regional Coordinating Program. In particular, China has done a big job at doing this and achieving, in doing so, achieving a disproportionate representation, disproportionately high representation of these organizations. It also is evident to me that the United States takes very little advantage of these organizations, and it puts us at a numeric disadvantage when you look at how we project our influence in these organizations, how we make American thought and American perspective heard, particularly in light of the fact that these other countries that do not pay as much on a percentage basis are overrepresented, excuse me. So I'd like to know how many of these positions, these 3 programs that I just mentioned, does the department currently fund? And do we intend to continue funding those? I'd like to get an accounting of that.
Thank you, Senator, for your question, and I appreciate your interest in this important issue. We have been examining this as part of our efforts, supported very generously by the Senate, and we appreciate your support for that. As we have set up our new Office of Multilateral Strategy and Personnel, which we are now in the process of getting authorization for and hope to be staffing in the next several weeks here. Because this is an important issue. How do we take best advantage of those programs throughout the UN system and throughout the other international organization systems to make sure that we are placing the next generation of American professionals in those organizations to ensure their integrity, their strength, their efficacy, and also their accountability, because we do provide a lot of funding for those organizations. I don't have the exact figures of the number of JPOs that we pay for in the system, but that number I know is increasing, again, in part due to the support we have received from this committee and from the Senate. We appreciate very much that effort, and we are in the process of preparing our regular reports on these programs where we will have the numbers, and we're happy to share those with you. But we are looking at how do we increase, not only in the JPO programs, but also in the mid-ranks and in the senior ranks, and making sure that we have, if not Americans, like-minded partners and allies that share our values who are in those positions, because it is important not only in the senior leadership positions, but all the way down, that you have people who are going to be independent-minded, that are going to reinforce the values and the foundational strengths of the international system so that we can fight back against this bullying that has been happening.
Well, I would look forward to hearing from your organization if you could provide a timeline of how these numbers have moved over time. I'm encouraged to hear that they're increasing, at least that's your sense of it. And I'd also like to understand what measures you're taking, particularly at the financial organizations and the standard-setting organizations, how you are strategizing a way to move forward in this, and in particular, the HR policies that may be discriminatory toward Americans. My understanding is that if a person has dual citizenship, that they're counted as an American rather than as whatever the other citizenship might be, again, making the numbers harder for us to accomplish. And I'm particularly concerned with respect to World Bank, IMF roles there in terms of us being underrepresented. And it's become even more obvious to me in recent years that standard-setting bodies, particularly with respect to 5G, are an area where we need to be deeply concerned and deeply focused on being properly represented there. So I appreciate a report back at your earliest convenience on that. Mr. Fritz, if I could turn to you, please. I appreciate the fact that in April, the Department has issued new guidelines for how we interact as the United States government with Taiwanese counterparts. And I certainly support the fact that we're going to be more focused on and taking a greater perspective on having our United States diplomats engage with Taiwanese counterparts in that regard. I want to particularly commend my former DCM, Joe Young, who's now the Chargé, or was most recently the Chargé d'Affaires in Japan for hosting his counterpart at the Taiwan Economic and Cultural Office there in Japan at the U.S. Ambassador's residence. I think that sends a very strong message. And Deputy Assistant Secretary Fritz, I wanted you to provide any further updates that you might have on these guidelines, how we're making progress on this, and how you see it unfolding.
Thank you very much for that question, Senator. And I can tell you that these new guidelines are indeed the most liberal that we've had since since basically 1980 when we first started issuing these at the State Department. There are a number of restrictions that were part of earlier versions that have been lifted, allowing for more easy contacts, meetings in U.S. office buildings, at the offices of the Taipei Economic Cultural Representative Office. And we are, without going into specifics of any of these specific meetings, I can tell you we're taking full advantage of these, and our Taiwan friends are noting this and are quite appreciative. I would point out that the new contact guidelines have been welcomed in public from President Tsai's office down through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to TECRO here in Washington, D.C. And you really can see the uptick in interactions between U.S. government officials and their Taiwan counterparts.
Well, I would just note this, and I appreciate the time, but the meeting between Charge d'Affaires Young and his counterpart at the ambassador's residence in Japan got press all over the Japanese media and all over Asia. So this can make a real mark. It can send a real message. So I appreciate your expanding this policy as much as possible. Thank you.